Padayo. Karoti. Manam. Ahuda. Vibhuti. Prenkam. Shrita. Ya. Kusumakara. Anugai. Vigiyamana. Priya karma. Gayati. Thank you. Shriyacharupin Yugaya Padayo. Karoti manam bahuda vibhutibi. Prenkam Shritaya Kusuma Karanuger. Vigiyamana Priyakarma Gayati. Shriyatra Upin Urugaya Padayo. Karoti manam bahuda vibhutibi. Prenkam Shritaya Kusuma Karanuger. Vigiyamana Priyakarma Gayati. Shriyatra Rupin Urugaya Padayo. Karoti manam bahuda vibhutibi. Prenkam Shritaya Kusuma Karanuger. Vigiyamana Priyakarma Gayati.
Shriyatra Rupin Urugaya Padayo.
Shriyatra Rupin Urugaya Padayo.
Karoti manam bahudha vibhutibhi.
Karoti manam bahuda vibhutibi.
Prenkam Shritaya Kushmakaranugayr.
Prenkam Shritaya Kusuma Karanuger.
Vigiyamana Priyakarma Gayati.
Vigiyamana Priyakarma Gayati. Prabhupin Yugaya Karmano. Thank you. Would anyone else like to lead the chanting of the verse? Okay, we'll go to the word for word. Shri. Shri. the goddess of fortune, Yatra, in the Vaikuntha planets, Rupini, in her transcendental form, Urugaya, the Lord who is sung of by the great devotees, Padayo, under the lotus feet of the Lord, Karoti, does, Manam, respectful services, Bahuda, in diverse paraphernalia, Vibhuti be, accompanied by her personal associates, Prenkam, movement of enjoyment, Shrita, taken shelter of, Ya, who, Kusumakara, spring, Anugai, Anugai,
Anugai,
by the black bees,
by the black bees,
Giyamana,
Giyamana,
being followed by the songs,
being followed by the song,
Kriyakarma,
Karma,
activities of the dearmost,
activities of the dearmost,
Gayati,
Gayati,
singing.
singing.
Translation: the goddess of fortune in her transcendental form is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet. And being moved by the black bees, followers of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure service to the Lord along with her constant companions, but is also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. There's no purport to that, so I'll read the Sanskrit text 15. Darsha tatra kila sattvatam patim shriya patim yagya patim jagat patim sunanda nanda prabalar hanadivi sva parshadagrai parisevitam vibhum. Translation: Lord Brahma saw on the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, and Arhana, his immediate associates. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When we speak of a king, it is naturally understood that the king is accompanied by his confidential associates, like his secretary, private secretary, aide-de-camp, ministers and advisors. So also, when we see the Lord, we see him with his different energies, associates, confidential servitors, etc. So the Supreme Lord, who is the leader of all living entities, the Lord of all devotee sects, the Lord of all opulences, the Lord of sacrifices, and the enjoyer of everything in his creation, is not only the Supreme Person, but also is always surrounded by his immediate associates, all engaged in their loving transcendental service to him. Om Ganatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Putale Svayam Upakadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakammalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatayubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Pyevacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 14 and 15. Sri Yacharupin Yogaya Padayo Karoti Manam Bahuda Vibhutibi Prinkam Sritaya Kusuma Karanuger Vigiyamana Priyakarma Gayati. The goddess of fortune in her transcendental form is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet and being moved by the black bees, followers of spring. She is not only engaged in variegated pleasure, service to the Lord, along with her constant companions, but is also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. Dadarshtatatra kila satvatam patim shriya patim yagapatim jagatpatim sunandananda prabalar hana dibi svaparshata grai parisevitam vibhum. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, and Arhana, his immediate associates. Okay, so Prabhupada uses this term a lot, Godhead, back to Godhead. And so we got like, Godhead is like kingdom. Okay, so like there's a kingdom with so much variety and purses, and then there's the supreme personality in the kingdom, the king. So back to Godhead, and Prabhupada uses the term supreme personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. There's many personalities of Godhead, and Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and Brahma through his austerities and devotions, having this vision of absolute truth revealed to him. And so this term, it describes about goddess of fortune, Lakshmi. Like the word money is sometimes devotees refer to money as Lakshmi. And so prosperity, wealth, and that's Lakshmi. And so here is the personality of Lakshmi, and what she's doing is she's engaging in the service of Krishna, or Krishna's expansion as Vishnu, surrounded by her constant companions. It's described a similar vision by Lord Brahma in his beautiful Brahma Samhita, Chintamani Prakarasatma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Viteshu Surabir Abhipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasrasata Sambrahma Sevyamanam Govinda Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire in abodes built of spiritual gems, served by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis, or goddesses of fortune, and surrounded by millions of purpose trees, Kalpavriksha. So, okay, so there's so much variegatedness in the absolute, in that supreme destination, Param Gata, Param Gati, in Godhead. There's so much variety of form and personality, and the black bees, followers of spring and seasons and color, and so much variety in this world. And actually, so this world is so beautiful and gorgeous and wonderful and fantastic and ferocious. And actually, and Krishna says, Yada vibhuti matsatvam srimad ujitam evava tata eva vagat tram ekam senusito jagat. He says, but this whole world, all these mighty, wonderful, glorious creations, they spring from but a spark of my splendor. And so actually, all the vibrancy of this world is really just a dull reflection of what's there in the variegatedness in the spiritual realm. And okay, so if someone's on a spiritual path, spiritual journey, Hare Krishna Paya, someone's on a spiritual path, spiritual journey. So this is an important point. What's the goal? Like, what's the ultimate destination? And because we can see here, we're all looking for there's no joy without variety, right? There's no joy without variety. We're all looking for variety of relationships here, and variety of music and food and activity. There's no joy without variety. So then, if the ultimate destination when one achieves spiritual enlightenment is no variety, it's just undifferentiated oneness, it's kind of uninteresting. At best, it represents because like the variety in the material realm, if that's the thing, like if we're honest, we see it's ultimately disappointing. It's ultimately disappointing, like, oh, whatever. I worked all week, but the weekend will be different. Oh, that's going to be great. That's going to be amazing. Okay, but it's ultimately disappointing. Okay, right? It's because, I'll get to go on vacation. But then we need a vacation from the vacation. Yeah, right. So, I mean, maybe some temporary gratification. And so tapo divyam puchakina sattvam shuddhyadhyasman brahmasakyam tvanantam. So this is variety. This is variety of form and personality and color and pastimes that it's not inebriated. It's full with ever increasing bliss of the soul. So that it's qualitatively different. In the second verse we read here, it says, Lord Brahma saw on the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community. So we're all looking to join communities and belong to communities. So we're encouraged to, become part of Krishna's community. That's our natural state. We're not talking here in terms of an upadi or like a material designation, like I'm a Hare Krishna devotee, okay? Or like I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I belong to this club, I belong to that club, right? So I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Buddhist. I'm a Hare Krishna devotee can be the same sort of material designation that blocks one from actual spiritual progress. So it's not about identifying. That's why myself, yeah, I don't use that language pretty much never, right? like I'm a this. Yes, I'm a Hare Krishna. I tend to not say things practically absolute. But yeah, I'm endeavoring to follow Srila Prabhupada. I'm endeavoring to follow a process of self-realization, a science of self-realization. It's a real adventure. It's a science of self-realization called Krishna consciousness, called Bhakti Yoga. And science, what do you mean? Science means it's a process I follow and I can experience the results. I can experience the results, experience the transformation of consciousness. So we're encouraged to truly enter into this devotee community, enter into this Vaikuntha world. Vaikuntha means place without anxiety. Right? So it's called Nitya Lila, Nitya Lila, which means the pastimes are forever. I mean, to break it down scientifically. So like, in the material world, there's the Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. And so Tamas, it's like the mode of destruction. And Rajas is the mode of creation. Okay. And so Sattva is the mode of maintenance. And so as we approach spiritual world, as we approach Vaikuntha, there's no tamas, so things don't get destroyed. And there's emanation, but there's no creation. There's only sattva, which means each moment, each activity, each pastimes exists eternally. And we are spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, as Dehar Desjardins said. We are spiritual beings. And just like the existential fact is, we're only going to be fulfilled and satisfied with pleasure that doesn't have a beginning or an end, that exists forever. Our nature is anandam buddhi vardhanam, ever expansive. We're only going to be satisfied with that sort of bliss. Yehi samsparsha jamboga dukkha gunaya evite dyantamanta konti nateshu amite buddha. That's why we're encouraged to give ourselves, give our time, give our life to that which is Nitya Lila, to that happiness that doesn't have a beginning and an end. It says wise people, they don't make the goal of life the temporary contact of the senses with the sense objects, because such gratifications have a beginning and an end. Just like a fish out of water, we will never be satisfied. So here, Brahma, he's meeting Krishna, Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we can say, well, see, there can be one conception that, like, well, if I'm not seeing the form of God, then he must not exist. Okay, because my senses are all powerful. Right? So that's kind of a very limited conception. And then there's another conception that, well, if I or someone can see the form of God, then it must be a limited form, like this form, or the form of the table, or the form of my friend over there. Well, that's not true either. So the spiritual forms are made of Ananda Chinmaya Sarujvala Vigrahasya, are made of cognizance, bliss, and eternity, unlimited, infinite. That's the form of Krishna. Vasudev means an all-pervading personality. Okay, so that's beyond our material conceptions. Atashri Krishna Namani, Nambhavid Graimindra, Sevin Mukhi Jivida, Svayameva Sparatyada. That with material eyes, we're not going to see spiritual form. With material ears. So as we expose ourselves to spiritual sound vibration, and spiritual form, then our senses get purified. Then our senses get purified. And then we open up to form that is eternal, to sound vibration that is eternal. And so, so we're, Prabhupada sometimes he uses the term that we're, to take a risk, because in the early stages of our attempts at bhakti yoga, it's like, well, I don't know. I don't have firm trust in, Goddess Lakshmi and the Vaikuntha planets and the bumblebees. It's described here. The black bees, followers. I don't know. I don't know. So, yeah, for the pure devotees who are fully realized, then they're associating with Lakshmi and the bumblebees and the airplanes, and the ladies are as beautiful as lightning because of their celestial complexions, and all these combined together appear just like the sky decorated with both clouds and light. They're experiencing that just as like I'm sitting here about 6 feet from Payal, and like, yeah, it's very clear, full trust in that. Yeah, so that experience is available, and so it's like we're going to devote ourselves to something, and so we're encouraged to, okay, if we're going to take a risk, let's take that gambling propensity and invest it in Nitya Lila, in eternal pastime. Take that gambling propensity and invest it in Vaikuntha. As this is the most worthwhile risk. Otherwise, what is there? What is there in the material dream world? What is there here? Narada Muni speaks to his disciple Vyasadeva. Jaktvasa dharmam charanam pujamar bhajana pakota patettatoyati yachakvava bhajama muda mushikim kavarta aptos bhajatam svadharmata. Narada Muni, he says that, okay, even if someone achieves a success in material realm, and it doesn't mean we should ignore material realm, just we all know the analogy. We take care of the car, but we want to remember the car is there to get me to a destination. So this is described as the Param Gati, this Vaikuntha, the supreme destination. And so anything we create in the material world, within material realm, like that which has a beginning and end, whether it's a beginning and end in 10 minutes or 10 trillion years, it's all not even a lightning flash compared to our eternal life. It's like sandcastles. The tide comes, washes it away. And at some level, we know that. And so, we're filled in material attempts with that sense of emptiness and futility. We know that. And so much of life is about trying to numb the hollowness of that. And so Narada Muni is saying, like, that's a gamble that, like, no one's going to win in material life. And that's a gamble that no one's going to win. So even if our faith is not firmly developed, and material consciousness means, yeah, my trust is not fully developed here. And so with some higher intelligence, we can say, okay, but I'm gonna give my time here. And even if it's like, well, I don't know about this eternal Vaikuntha world stuff, I'm not sure about that. Even if we were to look just practically, like, look, I just want to be happy in this life, I think that's a strong argument for Krishna consciousness too, or at least sattvic living. Because where is a happier, more peaceful, cleaner, more fulfilling life than in a truly sattvic, transcendental lifestyle, even apart from what happens after the soul leaves this body once and for all. After the soul leaves this dream world once and for all. I know when I developed the Vedic personality inventory back in the 90s. The hypothesis was consistent with what the Vedas assert, that a sattvic worldview, sattvic habits, sattvic lifestyles around social life, association, around eating, sleeping, a sattvic life correlates with happiness. Okay? Again, apart from what someone's view of after the death of the body. Of course, to be more precise, we can say the death of the body, but to be more precise, the body's already dead. And so to get that, and then to try to squeeze some, like there's no joy in dead matter. There's no joy in dead matter. And so the more we come towards sattva and then transcendence, then it's the soul experiencing its natural joy as the Lord of Vaikuntha is Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord of Vaikuntha, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. These are self-revealing sources of joy. And kind of the lock for that revelation is to follow Lakshmi. She's serving with love and devotion. She's serving with love and devotion. And along with her constant companions. So just like we can serve, we can please the goddess of fortune, the goddess of all abundance and prosperity. A word for Lakshmi is Chanchala, which means flickering. Chanchala Mahimana Krishna. So Arjuna says in Bhagavad Gita, the mind is flickering. The mind is flickering, goes here and there. So similarly, if we're trying to have Sita without Ram, if we're trying to have the kingdom of God without God, then even if there's so-called prosperity, it will be flickering. It will be flickering. And so this, well, a common saying in abundance personal growth is rich is not he who has the most, it's he who needs the least. So that points to the Atma Rama quality. So this is real rich. This is real strength. I've quoted a few times in the past several months, including in coach training in places, a 1944 article from Srila Prabhupada. And he's analyzing the philosophy of the Theosophists. And he describes the Theosophists as their mentality. He says, well, it's a nice sentiment that they will not rest easy at night as long as the weak are oppressed, as long as the weak are oppressed by the strong and things like that. So Prabhupada, that's a nice sentiment, but in this Vaikuntha program, in Vaishnavism, our approach isn't so much to prevent the weak being oppressed by the strong. Our approach is to make everyone so strong that they won't be oppressed. So that's powerful. And it's out of the box. Everyone's so strong, which means that I'm not dependent on any way on anything external. I'm self-satisfied in the bliss of the soul, connected in a devotional attitude with Super Soul, with Krishna. I'm a true follower of Lakshmi, not out of greed, but from devotion to serve Gopi Bhartu Bada Kamala Dasa Dasu Nudas. The chief Lakshmi is really Radharani, serving the servant of the servant of the. So that's a bliss that nothing can take away. That's a peace, a satisfaction, a sense of security. That is a fearless and doubtless way of success. Ichatam akatobayam yoginam ripik niranitam harinama kirtanam. Chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Having these visions of Vaikuntha, having the name, having these eternal vibrations in our heart at all times, then we're unstoppable. Then, because we're free from greed and lust and envy, we're not setting ourselves up to be exploited. As long as I'm dependent on anything external for my so-called happiness, I basically am holding up a sign, please exploit me, please exploit me. I'm ready to be cheated, and I'm ready to cheat. So this is true, honest life. And yes, so also in that conversation with Vyasadeva, Narada Muni, he describes that Yaduttamashloka Gunanu Varnanam Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pratishloka Abhadavat Yapi Namanyanantasya Yashon Kintanyach Shinvanti Ganti Grinanti Sadava. That Vyasadeva, he compiled the most amazing literatures culminating in the Vedanta Sutra. And Narada Muni said, Vayasam Tirtam, he essentially said, this is trashy literature. He essentially said like that. He said, because people are going to miss the Lord of Vaikuntha. They're going to miss the spirit of Lakshmi, as described here. Okay, and these were great Vedanta Sutra. I mean, like that, the Upanishads. But Narada Muni said that compose that literature that is really for the swan-like people. The swan is characterized. The swan can differentiate. If there's a mixture of milk and water, the swan can pick out the milk, pick out the nectar. And so as a result of that conversation, Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam to give us an opportunity. So it's described at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Dharma Projita Kurtita Parmanima Saminam Saranam Satam, Vejam Bastam, Achabastu Shivadam, Tapo Trayan Mulanam. That this rejects any cheating in the name of spiritual life, any cheating in the name of religion. Right? Again, not any materialistic religion. And this gets to the essence of spiritual life, what religion is supposed to be about, which is clearing anartas, clearing that which is superfluous, clearing that which is far into the soul, far into the heart, and awakening the soul's natural love for God, service propensity for Sri Krishna. That's the essence given there. Hare Krishna, Casey. Welcome. So it's described. Yam vapi smran bhavam chajak jante kale from tom tomeviti konteya sadatad bhava bhavita. That whatever state we're absorbed in when the soul leaves the body, then the subtle material body will take the soul to our next body. It's basically the essence and ultimate in that principle we know from transformation, clear intention, consciousness, and the result, right? We develop a particular consciousness, and then that's going to determine my day and my next year, right? Things go from subtle to external. So, yes, I know that when I was first exposed, like when I first participated in the human potential movement in the late 70s, when I was 18 years old, first started taking seminars, I was very attracted to these principles of 100% responsibility, clear intention, consciousness, and the result. And then I was thinking, well, and I could see how that worked in life, how that applied, whether one believes it or not. But how does that apply to, why is one person born like that? Or one entity is born like an animal, one is born rich, one is a poor family. So it's just random chance, and then these principles start applying? That didn't make sense. And then I started reading the books of Srila Prabhupada. And I found that what was attractive for me in the human potential movement, the secular humanists, that I didn't need to give anything up. That I was finding in Prabhupada's teachings, in these books, that I was finding that all that is true and valid in these teachings, whether it's, we didn't use the word coaching in those days, around counseling, leadership training, communication training, personal growth, psychology, all that's valid finds its completion and perfection and most sublime utilization here. So here we have these principles like, okay, yeah, so like it's not an accident that I was born into this body. Okay. And so according to the consciousness I develop in this body, then that's gonna determine my day. It's going to determine what's happening at 12 noon today, right? And it's going to determine where the soul goes upon, the death of the body, keeping in mind that in a sense the body is always dead, but it appears alive because the soul is inside to animate it. Just like a car is always dead matter, but it could appear alive because when the driver's inside. So we're encouraged to take an intelligent risk. It's not really a risk, but to the extent that our trust isn't fully developed, take an intelligent risk and absorb ourselves in this consciousness. I'll just read this. These verses are so indescribably beautiful. The goddess of fortune in her transcendental form is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet, and being moved by the black bees, followers of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure, service to the Lord, along with her constant companions, but is also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. Lord Brahma saw on the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabal, and Arhana, his immediate associates. So we get to follow in the footsteps of the goddess of fortune, of Lord Brahma, the head of our sampradaya, and we hear about doorkeepers, we hear about servants like Jai and Vijay, and here's others, Nanda, Sunanda, Prabal, Arhan. So this destination, Vaikuntha, this place without anxiety, which we get to experience in this very body, to the extent that we absorb ourselves in these forms, in these pastimes, rather than in so many temporary forms and pastimes and sound vibration, then we experience place without anxiety. Then we experience that fearlessness. We experience our eternal nature. And then we're abide. Then that's our natural fearless condition. It's described. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Satya Kabunoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karye Udai. That this Krishna consciousness, it's not something artificially imposed from some external source. Love of Krishna is eternally situated in the hearts of all living entities. And it's awakened by this process of hearing and chanting, just like we're doing here this morning. Okay. I'll bring that to a close. And I'm glad to hear questions and comments. I'll close by reading the Sanskrit and the verses one more time. Shri Yachurupinyu Padayo Karoti Manam Bahuda Vibhutibi Penkam Shritaya Kusumakar Anugar Vigi Yamana Priyakar Magayati. The goddess of fortune in her transcendental form is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet, and being moved by the black bees, followers of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure, service to the Lord, along with her constant companions, but is also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. I'll just note there that term, transcendental form, right? So forms in this world, including our bodies these are mundane forms. Transcendental form means the form itself is non-different from the person. The form is constituted of eternality, bliss, and cognizance. And we awaken to that to the extent that we engage in this process. And text 15, Dedarsha tatra kila sattvatam patim shriya patim yagapatim jagatpatim sunanda nanda prabha larhana dibi swaparshadagrai parisevitam vibhum. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, and Arhana, his immediate associates. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your attention and hearing. I welcome at this time if anyone would like to share any comments or realizations or ask any questions.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Nandini.
I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
And the comment is when you spoke about death, like the consciousness of that we have or that we're in at the time of death, how important that is. I had an experience or an insight this week. I visited a monastery, a Christian monastery, like a museum. It's no longer a monastery; it's a museum, and I could see like in each room of the monks, there's a symbol. There's like a do you say a skull?
Skull? Yeah.
A skull?
Skull. Yeah.
Or like a painting with dried flowers. And I was curious, and I asked the guide, and she said that it was for that particular monastery, the monks, they would meditate on death every day. And the skull and the dead flowers, they're symbols to remind them every day about death. And it was quite an insight for me, because there's so much. I mean, who wants to be reminded of death? And then by choice. And it was an eye-opener for me and inspiring that they consciously choose that each day, or they chose that.
Thanks for sharing that. And I know you have a question and I want to hear it, but I'm inspired by what you share. Well, it's somewhat morbid in an inspiring way. Because just the fact, okay, skull, we can understand, but just the fact, this is interesting, that, okay, like a painting of dead flowers, right? So that really gets to the material nature. Because like when we speak of beautiful things, like why are you talking about how this world is a place of birth, death, old age, disease? There's so much beauty. We'll usually say like flowers, okay? And so there are so many beautiful, but that's the nature of material beauty. That, okay, so a beautiful fragrant flower, soon it's going to become wilted. It's going to start to smell bad, and we'll want to take it outside, right? So all material beauty is like that. It's the law of diminishing returns. And so it's not to deny material beauty. It's look at, and then opening up to spiritual beauty, then that's ever increasing. The flowers in Vaikuntha have no death. It's ever increasing bliss, ever increasing nectarian fragrance. So just the wilted flowers, I find that very significant. Please continue.
They're still fresh, Damayanti. Thank you. Actually, I have two questions, but I'll ask one first. You gave a definition of Godhead that I never heard before. So you were saying Godhead, the translation is it's like the land of God, the kingdom of God. It's in the German translation. This meaning is totally lost.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, but yeah, that's my understanding. That Prabhupada writes, when we speak of a king, it is naturally understood that the king is accompanied by his confidential associates, like his secretary, private secretary, aide-de-camp, ministers, and advisors. So all of those and all of the Chintamani all of the buildings in the kingdom, that it's all part of Godhead. And then the king is the supreme personality of the kingdom. So Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So yeah, that's my understanding from Prabhupada. I'm glad it impacted you in some way.
So head has nothing to do with the head in this word.
Well, it's metaphorical, right? The head means at the top. So like the head is the head. The body has so many organs, and they're ruled by the head. I mean, it's metaphorical. They're ruled by the head.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask my other question later on, maybe.
Okay, we'll make a bookmark there. Thank you, Anandini. Other questions or comments? Paya.
I'm really appreciating what Anandini shared. Thank you for sharing about the monks and you're sharing about the flower, because it relates to my email I sent to you. Like this week, I've been looking at, whether I was reading the news or what I was looking at, looking at a lot of suffering that's occurring in the world. And I started questioning, why? I think there's this part of me that still wants to know, why is there so much suffering?
Yeah.
And hearing your example of the flower, it's like, yes, it's beautiful and it also dies. Like, that's real. Let's not deny the reality of the flower. And I guess where I'm going with that is, with suffering, I mean, just like in nature, there's a lot of killing of animals. They kill each other.
Yes.
They hurt each other. And so same thing in the material realm for us as humans, there is suffering.
Yes.
And I guess there's a part of me that maybe wants to deny that wants to pretend that it doesn't exist, but it exists. And so when I see it again, it's like, oh, it exists and it's painful. I guess there's a part of me that doesn't want to experience pain. And maybe my question is what role does pain play in, and I mean, I guess maybe also in your sharing today is, with Godhead, there's no pain. In Godhead, in the kingdom, there won't be pain. If we're reading and hearing the Bhagavatam, we have less pain. We experience less pain, I should say. Maybe we won't not have less pain, but we'll experience less pain because we're experiencing that which is transcendental.
There's a lot to your questions. So I appreciate very much your thoughtfulness and your philosophical intellect practically applied to the news you're reading and the life you're experiencing. And so, okay. All right. So a few things. So as far as, let's call it this world, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Matras Parshas Tukantiya, Shitoshna Sukadugada Agama Painuni Chastam Stitikshas Bharata. He says the appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons, heat and cold. And we're encouraged to tolerate them without being disturbed, Dhira. So material pains and pleasures will be there in this world. And to the extent that we're absorbed in our life purpose, our transcendental life purpose, we won't be disturbed by the disturbances. We'll be less disturbed by the disturbances. Disturbances will build disturbances from our own body and mind, disturbances from disease, disturbances from old age, disturbances from our own cheating propensity and others' cheating propensity, disturbances coming from eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, etc., etc. So the disturbances are there. It's part of material nature. And to the extent that we're absorbed in life purpose, then we won't be disturbed by the disturbances. Relatedly, there's the book, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, right? You're familiar with that. So he was a psychiatrist back in the 70s. He wrote this great book. And the first 3 lines of his book is, life is difficult. And he was a psychiatrist, so he dealt with a lot of neuroses and psychoses. Life is difficult. He says, once we accept that life is difficult, then it doesn't matter. It means because then we can devote ourselves to our higher purpose. And then the goal of life is not to make it less difficult, to fix this, to reform things, and then it won't be difficult. No, that's the inherent nature here. And once we accept that, then even the difficulties, we relate to them in a way that deepens our dedication to our transcendental self-realization process, our transcendental process of cultivating love of God. And then even the pain and the difficulties, if to the extent that we've cultivated that consciousness, we get to relate to the pain and the difficulties as further impetus to realize that I'm like a fish out of water here. And let me make this the last time I'm forced to take birth. But the pillar difficulties, the pillar difficulties are birth, death, old age, disease, a world of scarcity, competition for scarce resources. And so real welfare work, para upakara, is for ourselves and others, support ourselves and others, to not be forced to take birth again, and to go to that place where there's activity, but it's spiritual activity. Yeah, as far as in Vaikuntha, yes, there's no pain and suffering. There is variety. So the principle is everything that exists in this realm exists in its pure original form in the spiritual realm. This realm is like a shadow reflection. So there is fear there, there's anger there, there's pain there, but it's all permeated by ever blissful spiritual ras. It's permeated by the spontaneous play of loving devotion in exchange with Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. So there is like a spiritual counterhole of material fear, but it's by material fear and pain, we can get some, just like from the shadow, we can get some idea that there is a real form. We don't really get a sense of what's the substance like. So the spiritual anger and even spiritual envy, I'm not trying to bring someone down, but like, oh, let me serve as good as them. Mother Yashoda, she's fearful that Krishna will be killed by this demon, or Krishna's eaten dirt and he'll get sick. Now, so that sort of illusion comes from love, not from alienation of self. Okay, so all the emotions exist in the Vaikuntha realm, the Goloka Vrindavan realm, and they're all permeated by spiritual bliss. Thank you, Paya. Gajendra. Gajendra, we're not here.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I was fumbling with the app to unmute. Yeah, that was, it's thought-provoking what people have been commenting about the monks and the dead flowers and things like that. And other people have covered some of the things that I said already. But I was also very much just relating it, to detachment and what is material consciousness and spiritual consciousness, or even where is the material world and where is the spiritual world. And while I have no doubt there's another world with a nature where the change and variety in that world has certain qualitative differences than this world. At the same time, there's phrases like, like, where is Vrindavan? Vrindavan is in one's heart and one's consciousness. And so I was just thinking, about those monks, like, so there is this, it's a lot of it's about attachment. What is sort of the difference between the material world and spiritual world, without trying to make it geography? It's, what is our consciousness, and what do we attach? So it's like, I'm thinking like, okay, we just got through March. We're still in spring here in Alachua. And, I love that. And I was just thinking like I would probably not look at a dead flower and go like, oh, this material world. I'd probably look at that flower and going to go like, thank you, Krishna, for allowing some spring. You are like the flower bearing spring. And I have so much gratitude that you allow me to be on the Dham here. And how do I keep it going? What's my service? How do I grow more flowers and offer you? And so it's just, for me, it's like, I was just sort of thinking like, it was almost like when I think about like the negativity of, impersonalists or ascetics, like there's there is this truth that's important. It's part of knowledge about the nature of this material world. So I could see where somebody could look at the dead flower and have some state within their being because it connects with truth about this world, and they could get some spiritually nourishing feeling from that experience. But for me, it sort of like would pale in comparison from just seeing the spring or even the dead flowers. It just, it's like almost like there's that relationship of gratitude. It's like there's a plate of prasadam, and it's like, I don't eat that plate of prasadam and look at maybe like just some little stuff rubbed into a paper plate and go like, yeah, it's just all so temporary, this food stuff, it's it's like, why be attached at that place? So even in this world, it's like, yeah, so I fully recognize, I don't want to like glorify this world as the supreme abode, and yet going more into the depth of, like one's heart and consciousness and mood and frame of mind a little more subjectively, and just realizing it is all Krishna's energy. So I don't know, it just went like that a little bit for me.
Thank you, Gajendra Guru. I appreciate you sharing very much. Yeah, this is just following up on your very nice points. Yeah, this is not a philosophy of suffer now and then when you die you'll go to heaven. It's ultimately consciousness. Sure, there's geography, but it's ultimately consciousness. We can experience Vaikuntha consciousness in this very body by engaging in the deathless activity of the soul, devotional service. Ihayasya hareradasya karmana manasagira nikhilas vapyavastasu jivan muktasa uchyate. And just as you're saying, so it's one thing, okay, we can look at the dead flower, we can look at skulls, this whole world is death, and that can help us become detached from material illusion, which is nice. But then what are we becoming positively attached to? Because the reality is the nature of the soul is to be attached. We can talk so much about just be detached, be detached. We say that a lot, so many people, just be detached. Great. But here's the thing, the nature of the self is to be attached. And that's just like the nature of fire is to be hot, the nature of sugar is to be sweet. So our choice is, are we going to be attached to matter or spirit? To the extent that we're attached to matter, it's self-sabotaging. We're setting ourselves up for untold suffering and misery. And so don't be attached to that which is temporary, but what should I be attached to? And it's just to nothing that's not going to satisfy. So here, we get to be attached to these transcendental forms, transcendental service. Thanks for your sharing, Gajendra. Daru Brahma Prabhu.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Just when you were saying about the different emotions are there in the spiritual world, it reminded me what my Sri Acharya said about how back in the days when all the book distribution was going on, and it was very fired up all over the world. There was competition, and Prabhupada actually once he met Tamal Krishna, who was leading the big group of book distributors, and Acharya would actually beat him at Krishna. And so he said, "So he's beating you," and so he's basically trying to spark them, saying, "I like this competition." He didn't, So what are you going to do now? Are you going to beat him? And so forth. So even things like, again, as we said, anger or envy, but it's a pure envy. It's not, as you said, to be like, oh, he's serving Krishna so nice there. She is, but I want to serve him better. It's not like I'm going to beat her out and show everyone I'm best. No, but just in that way, a nice envy, So everything's there. It's pure form. I'm reminded of that when you said that,
Thanks. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, everything exists in its pure form in Vaikuntha. And again, following on the point, and we can make this world Vaikuntha, which is much better than heaven. But it's a matter of consciousness. I like your examples, Daru Prabhu. Yeah, there's a letter because Tamal Krishna Goswami's book distribution party, they were like distributing the most books practically every month. And then there was one month where I think it was Los Angeles, Jayatirtha Prabhu's party surpassed Tamal Krishna Goswami's party. And Prabhupada wrote a letter to Jayatirtha saying, he's saying, I've seen the book report, I've seen the book scores, and he said, Tamal will have heart failure. Prabhupada wrote, Tamal's going to have heart failure. So there's material envy, which just burns the heart. It's miserable. Like when we're in material envy and jealousy, it's just terrible. We probably all have experience, just terrible. But then spiritual envy, it's not like I want to bring you down, but just like, wow, you're more, you know more Bhagavad Gita than me. Let me study Bhagavad Gita more. And, it's like an admiration that is uplifting. Similarly, there can be spiritual anger used in devotional service and like that. Thank you, Dan.
Actually, I was thinking how even we get, visions of it in our famous, let's say a tennis match with Nadal and Federer or something, and just see how even though they're fighting with each other, like point, still at the end, it's like so much appreciation for, I don't really hate you. It's just, I'm in the end, for the show and all, but really, we love each other, after each other, So that's the same way with all of us. Anyhow, I think those are good examples of that. Or after the hockey World Series, they all hug, even though they were swacking each other with sticks the whole game, Anyhow, we all love that stuff. Yeah.
Some highly civilized Kshatriya warrior spirit. We can see that in sports. It's not really there in today's warfare, but in the Vedic age, Kshatriya times, that was there. It was really like, wow, you're fighting so valiantly, and I'm appreciating that. I do want to kill you, but I'm appreciating your valor. And so we can see that in modern day sports competition. There's something valorous and noble about it. It's towards sattva. It's towards sattva. Thank you. Neela Madhava.
Okay, thank you, David. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. What I really loved about your class today was the phrase that you said that we're already dead. That's like a shocker to hear that. Oh, we're already dead. As long as we're just in material consciousness and we're just focused on our bodies, we are focused on, we're dead, without the aliveness of our awareness of our soul. So that I really appreciated that phrase, that we're already dead. Wake up, because if you don't recognize the other aspects of who you really are, you're just walking around, you're a zombie, you're dead. So I love that. Thank you for that.
Thanks for that, Neela Madhava. I'm hearing you speak. There's I don't know the Bible very well at all, but there's a statement from Jesus. He said something to the effect of, let the dead bury the dead. And so there's a whole context to that, which means that one who's not alive in self-realization and consciousness of the divine and devotional service, that then we're just like machines. The body's like a dead machine. So yeah, the body is dead, and the body is dead. And to the extent that we identify it, then we're like dead machines too. I mean, that's morbid, but it's a fact. I appreciate what you're appreciating, and I'm seeing Damayanti wrote a comment. She wrote, "My son Lakshmana acted out dead when you said that today. We had fun over here with that. Glad to hear it. Hare Krishna." Bhakti Keith.
Yeah, 2 points with what you're saying about, I have been connecting more with what you're saying lately about needing that experience, that higher experience, the spiritual experience. Without that, it's just, you're always impelled to just seek happiness in this world, you know? It's just, you're going to take what's there. And without this experience of spiritual, heartfelt, higher taste, life it's agony, you know? It's an agonizing situation. And the other point that I wanted to make was, I appreciate how you've been mentioning this lately about it, quoting Prabhupada, that it's not our business to kind of like stop oppression from happening. It's our business to make others strong so they won't be oppressed. And I really appreciate that with the atmosphere that's going on in the world right now. You know, like, because there's so much smoke and mirrors and deception and manipulation, you know, like this is one of the big things that they use. Oh, we have to stop them, so now we have to go and attack this and do that, right? And yeah, so just it's so complicated, the situation, that it you know, I'm just going to use a small example. Like, for example, like the media is sometimes obviously giving lots of lies. It's very blatant. But then there's a big thing talking about freedom of speech, right? So you almost feel like they shouldn't be like that. They should, and you know, if you want to go and stop those people from doing that, they'll use that as an excuse to take away our freedom of speech, right? So it's just so complicated, so many, but I'm really appreciating that, the necessity of making myself stronger and supporting other people to be stronger and connected with knowledge and truth, that we can kind of like deal with situations in life as they come to us, you know. Anyway, I don't know if I put that so clearly.
Thanks for your sharing, Keith. Thanks for your sharing. Yeah. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he has a very powerful statement that starts with, "The world stands in no need of any reformer." So, should we just be apathetic? No. Let's get excited. Let's get enthusiastic to cultivate consciousness, to cultivate transcendental consciousness, because that's what the world's lacking: Krishna consciousness, transcendental consciousness. Because we can reform this way, that way. It's communism, capitalism. We can reform But whatever the type of government or economic system or political system is called, it's inhabited by people. And if the people's consciousness is full of greed, lust, illusion, deception, anger, hatred, then it's going to be a miserable place to live, whether this party's in charge or that party's in charge. And whatever the political economic system is called, if the people are dedicated to self-realization, connected with God consciousness, empathy, loving spirit, knowledge, clarity, healthy austerity, and understanding the purpose of life, then it's going to be a very nice place, a very nice place to live. And I like how you said, Keith, that's the thing. Like sometimes the naked, suffering, violent face of material nature shows itself, but sometimes there's a veneer of no, it's very happy here. Material happiness essentially is relative relief from suffering. Just like someone could be punished by having their head held under water, and then when the head is lifted, they take a breath of air. Oh, this is happiness. Well, it's not happiness, it's just relief from terrible suffering. Okay. And then so much of material life is trying to numb the fact that we're empty inside through drink or drugs or spending money at the mall that we don't need to spend, or gossip. I'm suffering here, I'm envious, I'm jealous, but let's gossip about him or her. And maybe if we can put them down, then we feel better about ourselves. It's all just shadow stuff. And so here, and I like how you brought in about the media, Keith, there, because whether it's the media, the point is to make ourselves spiritually strong, we need to hear from an authorized, infallible source. And that's what we have here in Srimad Bhagavatam, in Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is sound vibration. This is guidance coming from the Vaikuntha world, coming from Krishna himself. It's an infallible source. Once we start hearing from sources that are not authorized, then we're part of the world of the cheaters and the cheated. And then we're never going to become spiritually invincible that way. Thank you, Keith. That's why Prabhupada titles his Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's not an arrogant title, it's a humble title. Shruti Smriti Purnani Pancharatra Vidim Vida Akantaki Harya Bhaktim Utpataya Vikalpate. If we're hearing not from authority, even if it's the Vedas or something spiritual, but if it's not from someone who's a pure servant of Lakshmi, a pure servant of Srimati Radharani, a pure servant of Bhagavad Gita, and there's other agendas involved, then just like the electric current's not going to come through. Prabhupada gives, or the Shastra gives the example of like milk. Milk is always pure and healthy. It's a metaphor. But milk touched by the lips of a snake becomes poisonous. So it's not that the milk's poisonous, but once a snake touches it, then the milk becomes poison. So even we can hear Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam or something about Krishna from someone who's not a pure devotee of Bhagavatam and Gita, and then the effect becomes actually toxic for our spiritual life. That's why it's very vital that we make distinctions about where we're hearing from. Jai Prabhupada. Anandini, did you have another question?
Yes, in the meantime, I have many more. But the question I wanted to ask is about Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1 and Canto 2, that they are called the lotus feet of Krishna. And I'm very curious about that. And maybe you can say a few words how, because like you were sharing, there's a lot about matter, and there's also a lot about the spiritual world. So there's the material world and the spiritual world described. So what? Yeah, I'm just curious to understand what that means.
Yeah, well, I don't have much realization, but Prabhupada does describe that. And just like, so God, Krishna appears in different forms. And one form is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so, he appears in the form of his name, Hare Krishna. Right? He appears in many forms. One form is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is non-different from Krishna. And so just like if we're looking at Krishna's deity form, it's recommended we start to look at the feet and then gradually get to his smiling face. So similarly, it's recommended that we start with the lotus feet. That's the first and second canto of the form of Krishna revealed in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the 10th canto is his smiling face. So it's recommended we start, I mean, there's many reasons why it's recommended, but we start with systematically reading from Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Tonvaya Tirata, from the first verse through the cantos. That said, because we're guided by Srila Prabhupada, even if we do go to Krishna book, even if we can pick up something from the 6th or 7th canto, and because we're guided by the pure devotee, it's still purifying. So both are true. Wherever we touch Bhagavatam, as long as we're guided by the pure devotee Srila Prabhupada through his purports, it's purifying. And simultaneously, we're recommended to start from the lotus feet, the first canto, and read systematically. Make a commitment. I'm going to read all of Prabhupada's 30 volumes of Bhagavatam. My understanding, it's a form, and the first and second canto are the lotus feet of the form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Well, one thought I had, and it came back when you were speaking now, if it relates to starting where we're at. And starting where we're at also means like acknowledging that we have senses and we are experiencing through our senses, and we're experiencing illusion and cheating and birth, death, old age, disease. And it is, like all these causes for suffering, and at the same time that's also part of Krishna. It's part of his creation, how he planned the world.
Yes, yeah, there's so much about creation in those first cantos. Prabhupada warns there's some they just jump right to chapters 29 to 33 of the 10th canto, Krishna's Rasa dance. And it's not starting where they're at. It's called Sahajya, pretending that we're more advanced than we are. So Prabhupada cautions against that. Yes, start where we're at. And so much of these first 2 cantos is about the creation of the material world, meeting us where we're at. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anandi.
And I wanted to add a small thing about these monks. Like, and I know sometimes it's about celebrating the suffering, but what I took from that place is, I mean, they all had beautiful flower gardens, so that didn't seem to be their mood, and I got more that it helped them to connect with urgency, to follow the teachings of Lord Jesus right now in this moment, and to meditate on the consciousness Lord Jesus had. Like, he was facing brutal death, and he was like full of love for God. And also they meditated on the Desert Fathers, which were not interested in any kind of religion, just as, they were not into designations. I wanted to add that.
Nice. Yeah, I'm remembering fondly in early 2016, you and I and your family, we visited Buddhist monks. We walked up the mountain. It was outside of Recon, Switzerland. And there's this Tibetan Buddhist monastery. It's where the Dalai Lama visits and stays when he visits Europe. And we had a snowball fight up on the way, and a scavenger hunt. It was a whole thing. And I was very moved. And so this Buddhist monastery, and Buddhism, it's kind of like a form of voidism, impersonalism. And I've shared this, that the first thing I noticed when I walked into that monastery was devotion, bhakti. They had the form of Buddha, they were offering an apple, they were offering incense. And Buddha's whole mission was to kind of, through some philosophical trickery, to kind of trick people who are tired of material life into some bhakti. And I could see, I had experience there that these monks, they had so much devotion in their heart for God. And they might not describe it that way, but so fond memories there. Thank you, Anandini. Keith, did you have your hand up again, or is it up from before?
Yeah, I have it up again. Yeah, I was wondering, I know it's a lot, but if you could give like a synopsis of how is the first two cantos Krishna's feet? Like, it's kind of hard to, I mean, I can kind of grasp the 10th canto being his face somehow, but like give an example of how the first two cantos represent Krishna's feet. Yeah.
Well, I think one reason is because they're dealing a lot with where we're at and the creation of the material world and the material elements and how they relate to spiritual source. And so we start at the bottom, and so it starts with, there's just a lot of focus there on the material energy and the different interplay of material energy. That's what comes to me. That's what comes to me. Thanks for that. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thanks for your association. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you.